Hello and welcome to episode 24 of the TRUUMAN Podcast, the podcast designed to create a generation of self-defined men. Today, I'm joined by Adam Parks. Adam, thank you so much for being with us today.
Absolute pleasure. Nice to be here, Lewis.
Amazing, thank you. I'm not sure if you've caught any podcasts yet, but I love to start the podcast with arguably the hardest question on the planet. And Adam, that is, in your own words, what makes you a man?
Do you know what? That's a fabulous question, and I'm sure that you have people sitting here who sort of scratch their heads. Do you know what? What I believe makes me a man, and I'm a little bit old-fashioned on this. What I believe makes me a man is trying to follow the sort of rules of being a man that were set to me by my father. Now that's strange, because when you try and associate kind of old-fashioned values, people kind of then associate that with sort of male stereotypes that are no longer kind of wanted or needed in modern society. But I think my father must have been quite a forward-thinking kind of guy, because his simple rules about being a man was always remember, you are no better than anybody else. Sex is actually just a genetic byproduct of life. And ultimately, I've lived a life that I think basically, I hope I've lived a life that my theory of being a man is that uh, I am just an equal, I hope, the same, no better than, not stronger. I don't have any of the stereotypes because they are just stereotypes. And stereotypes are generally falsehoods, of course, Lewis. Um, and that I think by being a man, for me, means that I pause. Pause. That's all right, you'll pause this out. Did you tell me this question beforehand?
That's the beauty of it.
Okay. Oh, I bet some people have come up with some corking answers. Right. Okay. Right. The key thing for me is, yeah, it's about my father and the way that I was brought up, being a man. Um, And actually, right, yeah, I'm coming on this. And actually, labeling me a man is like labeling me anything else. And actually, we're not labels. We're all human beings. I am a Christian. I am a man of faith. We are all God's children. It doesn't matter if you're man, woman, any member of the LGBTQ plus organized groups. We're all the same. We're all equal. We're all seen the same. And actually, we're judged by what we do, not by what we are. That's the one that I want you to keep.
Lovely answer, Adam.
We're judged by what we do, not what we are. Yes.
Love it. Absolutely love it. Perfect.
Edit the rest out. Just go with that one.
No, I like the long form answers are better.
I'm having trouble with signal here, by the way. Is this you or me?
No, it's potentially a combination of both of us, but it should be fine. If you can hear me, we're good.
I can hear you. You broke up a little bit, but yes, I've got you. There we are.
Yeah, so we're recording both sides separately, so it's all good. If it becomes too crackly, let me know.
I will do.
Awesome. So, Adam, why don't you tell us a little bit about what it is that you do right now? What is your sort of day-to-day in the space?
Okay. Well, I guess I carry 3 titles at this moment in time, considering, as we'll come on to, I walked away from full-time education in the hope that I would start taking life a little bit easier. I'm actually finding myself more busy than I've ever been in my life, to be honest with you. And I kind of carry 3 titles. One, I'm an education consultant. I work with schools and support schools. I won't say in what area because I know we're going to come to that later in the interview. I am the CEO of a mental health non-profit organisation called Taking Off the Mask, which is an organisation that I did set up. Taking Off the Mask was the name of my blog, which kicked everything off, really. The very thing that started the ball rolling, so I guess assume we will come to that. And then for some reason known only to my sometimes fleeting insanity now and then, I jumped into local politics. And I'm now a local town and district councillor. I want to make it very clear. I'm not a political animal, hence keep sticking with local politics. But I stood on a very simple ticket, and that ticket was mental health and well-being and education, special educational needs. And it clearly has a massive resonance because, I'm not going to name my party, but my party does not generally do well in the ward of which I am the councillor, but I won the seat hands down. Now, I'm not the most charismatic person in the world, so I'm not going to believe it was down to my charisma, but it was clearly down from what the people said to me is because that I stood on a ticket, if you can call it that. I don't like giving mental health a label, but on well-being and mental health. And that certainly resonated with the people in my ward. And because quite clearly it resonates with everybody out there. But I'm not sure our politicians, whether it be local or national, are ticking the boxes or meeting the needs of those people that are struggling with their mental health. But again, we'll probably come to that later.
We probably will, yeah. And I do think your charisma is definitely in there as well.
Well, I'll take your word for
that. So let's talk about taking off the mask, because I think that's
yes, absolutely
the major thing for you and one of the things that set this all up, right? So let's go into a little bit more detail of that. Explain that to me.
Okay, well, we may as well go back to the beginning, and because taking off the mask is such an integral part of the whole story.
Yeah.
So when I walked away from education, and I walked away because of my mental health and because of a path that I took, which was but we will come to that. But I literally stood on the edge of the precipice. I started to think, how can I actually use this for some good? And I know that's what everybody says. They all say, oh, I wanted to use my experiences for some good. But I genuinely did. And I tell you for why. It's because I didn't fit, and I've used this word already, Liz, any of the stereotypes. I have no chemical imbalance of my brain. I am not a manic depressive. I do not naturally have suicidal inclinations. I was living proof that anybody, if they get enough kicks, can actually reach the edge. And I wanted to get that message out. And I've always loved to write. I've always loved to speak, as you can probably tell. And so what I did was I started to just write about my experiences. Now, strangely enough, I wrote about them just for me. I wanted to write them, read them, and understand them, if that made sense. And a couple of people read them and said, no, listen, other people have got to see these. Have you ever done any blogging? I've got no idea. I have no idea what blogging was. But they kind of showed me a particular site that I could go to and just put my stories on there. Listen, honestly, I didn't think anybody would have any interest in them whatsoever. I gave them the title Taking Off the Mask because it was about taking off the mask that we live behind. And that's what I called it. I was being a bit dramatic. And I wrote it in chapters. And for some reason, it went crazy. And sometimes it can do that. The right person clearly read it and shared it. Somebody with a lot of friends. And then it went viral. And suddenly, my blog was being read by thousands of people all over the world. And I could have sat at home and just sort of stroked my ego and thought, yes, I'm wonderful. I'm writing these things and people like to read them. But that's not the way I work. I thought, actually, I've got a huge mass of people here. I think it was about 13,000 people at the time. Over 100 countries in the world. We can be a force. So I used the name of Taking Off the Mask. I put it out there in my blog. I'm tempted to create an online community where you guys can all share your experiences too with each other. And again, the response was massively positive. I set up the Taking Off the Mask community. More and more people joined. People were putting on their own experiences. People were sharing their experiences. People were supporting each other. It was such a powerful thing to see. And so that was it. It was all a happy accident. I didn't set out to set up anything. It created itself. And so Taking Off the Mask now exists. We're still largely an online support group, but we do go out, we do give talks, we do give sponsorship, um, and we kind of try and bob our heads up wherever we can, really. Um, and we're now in the process of becoming a CRC and a full charity, because I think people always have a natural sort of non-profit. What does that mean? Well, quite simply, I've never taken a penny from Taking Off the Mask, but you know, we live in a society where not everybody always believes that. And I also do, as part of that as well, I do personally, my sort of donation to the charity is I give my services for free and will support individuals, groups, and otherwise. They will pay for that. That goes into Taking Off the Mask. That is then used for sponsorship. Scholarships is our big one. I'm very keen. My two passions are education and mental health. And what I want to do is use the money from Taking Off the Mask to sponsor people who have struggled with their mental health, to take qualifications, etc., for them to be able to give back and now support people with their mental health. If that makes sense.
Yeah.
So it's a very simple premise. It covers my two great passions. Our tagline is fighting the stigma of mental health. That's what it's all about. And remember, the majority of stigma for mental health is self-induced stigma. It's very easy to blame the public for it, but actually, especially with men, we create our own stigma. I'm a man, and I'm not allowed to feel this way, or I certainly can't tell people that I feel this way. And that's what it's all about. And it runs itself. It's beautiful. That was the great thing. It's got thousands of members who are so committed to it. It runs itself. I just sit back and sit in awe of what took place, what they do, and what takes place. So I started it. They've taken it and they've run with it, and it's just fabulous.
It's a true testament to the power of community, right? Real, true power. Yeah,
absolutely. And why it came about, and I'm sure you've heard this from other people you've interviewed, Lewis, is I'm not in any shape or form putting down or criticising counsellors, psychotherapists, psychologists, etc. They do a magnificent job. But actually, and I think, again, more so with men, they find it easier if they are going to speak, and they don't naturally find it easy to speak, they find it easier to speak to somebody who can relate than somebody who maybe has got the qualification that tells them they relate. And that's what Taking Off the Mask is. So if somebody comes in with postnatal depression or severe anxiety or the loss of a loved one, there are hundreds of other people that have experienced the same thing, and to say, I'm with you, I can tell you, this is what I did, this is how I felt. And that's what actually lifts you. I'm one of those people. I learn from talking to people who've been there. If you want to learn about the Holocaust, you've got to speak to a Holocaust survivor.
yeah.
If you want to learn about the war, you've got to speak to somebody who was there. Yes, the historians will give you the facts and the statistics and the information, but it's only somebody who's got it inside there that can truly switch you onto it and make you go, yes, that's what I need.
That's a really nice analogy. I like that a lot. That's really interesting. I think one of my favorite things about what you've said there and how it all started was it was essentially selfish. It was your therapy in a sense, and I can draw
Absolutely.
I can draw a lot of parallels because that's exactly why I started this. It was solely a selfish reason. I wanted to talk about what was going on with me, and I wanted to do it with other men to see if there was other people that wanted to have these conversations. So it's nice, and I hope to have as many users as you have in the future. That would be an amazing sort of goal.
Well, I'm now gonna, I'm gonna pop you out there to a few thousand more. So there you go.
There we go. We're starting to move, which is great. So yeah,
Gone again.
You touched on men there again, which is nice. In regards to seeking comfort from others rather than from experts, and yeah,
absolutely,
it seems to be a bit of a common trend. I've got a few friends and a few people that I've interviewed on this that are happy to speak with therapists and coaches and those sort of things. But
I'm more than happy to speak to them, and some of them are absolutely wonderful.
yeah,
And I want to make that very clear. I'm not putting it out there. Don't go and see a counsellor and don't see a therapist. What I'm saying is, if you can't because you can't,
yeah,
then there are people out there with none of those qualifications who genuinely can help and support.
yeah, definitely. I also see it as like a step one. Like that stigma of like going to speak to someone is
Yeah,
unfortunately still there for a lot of men, right? But
absolutely.
these communities that are popping up are helping men have these conversations, and ironically helping them get to those sort of professions when they need them because they feel more
Yeah,
comfortable doing it.
no, absolutely.
Amazing. So I want to talk a little bit, if you don't mind, more about the story before. So like what sort of caused all the stresses and all the things, and just sort of take us all the way through to a nice run up to that, if you don't mind.
Okay, yeah, not a problem at all. My story is not a new one. I'm sure it's one that you hear very often, and it's certainly one that I'm sure in the pubs and clubs of Great Britain is heard all the time. We have two. I always say this. We have two. I know people will say we've got more. I always say we have two lives. We have a home life. We have our work life, and we hope to find some kind of balance between the two. If one is struggling, we hope the other one can
Yeah,
at least find a, you know. And people say, oh, work, how can work ever lift you? Well, no, actually, work can at least be a positive thing because it takes you away from the negative of the other. And it's about by 2011, 2012, my relationship, my marriage was broken. Again, I can't use that as an excuse. How many people will say that? But up to that point, my work had always been something that I could throw it behind. I was very fortunate. I've been very successful in my role. I worked in special education, outstanding Ofsteds. It was great. And therefore, I always had something to bring about a little bit of positivity, or at least to take away from the kind of anguish that was at home. But in 2011, towards the end of 2011, I guess a perfect storm was reached. My marriage at that point came to an end. So it went from being not good to coming
yeah,
to an end. And let me make it very clear, I'm not now sitting here criticizing my ex-wife. Okay, it takes two
yeah,
to make something happen. But with that, and therefore this does now sound critical, it was determined by my ex-wife that she did not want for me to see my daughter anymore until the courts made a decision on that. Now, as you do, you go and see your lawyer, and many men will relate to this because this is as we know, this is one of the most common reasons for male suicide is family law
yeah,
and the loss of a child. I went to see my solicitor. My child was born in wedlock. I've got full parental responsibility. There was absolutely zero reason legally why I was not going to get my daughter back. So my immediate reaction to my solicitor was, well, I thought that was the case. Fantastic. So can I see her next week? Oh, sadly, it doesn't really work like
yeah,
that. The law in this country dictates that even though there is no reason to say no, we need to have the judge to say that.
yeah,
Okay, so can we get a meeting with the judge then and get it sorted? Okay. Well, no, it doesn't really work like that. You have to go through due process. Okay, that's fair enough. And then he used the words to me, and just be aware, Adam, slowly, slowly, catchy monkey. Okay, I thought it might take a few weeks. But after months of attempted mediation, first meetings, second meetings, all the time, the court saying, or the judge saying, well, we need to then do reports before the next meeting. You need to do reports for the. Even though at no point was it ever said I was not allowed to see my daughter, until my ex-wife said I could see my daughter, I couldn't. As far as the courts were concerned, if she said it's fine, then we could do it. But until a judge passed that verdict, they couldn't. So while this is all going on, I'm obviously going through absolute turmoil. I lost a huge amount of weight, 5 stone in weight, actually. I didn't sleep for weeks. I threw myself more and more and more into my work. And I started to do 40, 50, 60, 70, 80-hour weeks. I just didn't do it. I threw myself into my work. And then Ofsted came. So I'm this emaciated wreck by this point. But I need to be at work while this other thing is going on. And I'm making this story a bit too slow. I'm trying to build it. I'm trying to build it up to sort of create the atmosphere because it kind of then does make sense.
Yeah, no.
So Ofsted came in and to give you some idea, I can't even remember the Ofsted inspection. That shows the state of my mind at the time.
Yeah.
Miraculously, we got an outstanding, so I must have said some good things, but I don't remember it. What I do have some recollection of is the feedback from the Ofsted inspector at the end of the day. And there was a few of us sitting in the room, and I don't hear the words that are being said. I honestly do not hear it. It's like I'm in the corner looking down. And then I saw everybody sort of laughing, smiling, hugging. So it was clearly good news. It was dark by this point. I looked to my right. There was a window there. Because it was dark, it was like a mirror. And I saw this bearded, emaciated wreck. I did not recognize that person. I stood up and I walked out. I didn't join in the celebrations. I didn't do anything. I was just running on autopilot. And I went home. I went into work the next day. I sat at my desk. My maths teacher, Graham Brown, he'd been 20 years a minor, a proper stoky bloke, basically came in and said, "Hey up, yous. Congratulations, great news." And I just stared at him, and he could see straight away there was something wrong. And I said, "Are you okay?" I shook my head, cried like a baby, and collapsed on the floor. There was nothing left. He scooped me up like a baby. I got taken home. Of course, I had to go and see my doctor, and of course, inevitably, the doctor signed me off.
Yeah.
There was no way I was in any shape or form fit to work. But that meant I was stuck at home without my daughter in what was the family home, very large house, spiraling and spiraling and spiraling. And I became paranoid. I thought the world was against me. I began to think my house was bugged because I couldn't understand, why can't I see my daughter? Why can't I see my daughter? And I reached a point, Lewis, where I was convinced that it was never going to happen. The world was against me. And this is where I need to say, I did not want to kill myself. And I'm using those words carefully, but I did not want to be here anymore. And people say, "Oh, that's the same thing." It absolutely isn't the same thing. It isn't the same thing at all. I just didn't want to be here. So with my normal semi-autistic kind of way of doing things, I went into great detail about what I was going to do, how I was going to do it, and where I was going to do it. I knew I didn't want to do anything around here, where I lived. I knew I didn't want to do anything where people would have to see me. I didn't want anybody to have to go through any trauma because of what I determined I was going to do. So with great clarity, I went on Google Earth. I looked for a beautiful spot on the British coastline. I picked a spot in Devon, and I set off from Biddulph, North Staffordshire, and made my way down to Devon. I knew what I was going to do. I was absolutely calm. I felt more at ease. I won't say happy, but more at ease than I probably felt for months. And I think that's a very important point. And I drove down. I switched my phone off. I wrote some letters. I wrote a letter for my mum. I wrote a letter for my daughter. And I wrote a letter for my ex-wife, which wasn't abusive. I can say that in any shape or form. And I set off. And I drove down. I have to say, the local Staffordshire police were constantly calling my phone, but I didn't speak to them. They were magnificent, but I didn't speak to them. I didn't answer the phone at all. I drove down. I drove to the spot, a place called Devon Cliffs. Got out of the car. I went for a walk to have a look at the spot that I thought I'd chosen. Absolutely idyllic spot. I thought, yeah, this is absolutely perfect. To give some idea of how much detail I've gone into, I even had checked the tidal patterns because I didn't want anybody to have to see anything. Whatever I was going to do, I wanted to be all cleaned and washed away.
Okay.
That's the kind of detail that I went into. I picked my spot, I picked my time, and at that spot was a bench. And I sat on the bench and waited for the time. And I do remember noticing people walk past me and people looking at me with sadness in their eyes and kind of walking on by and talking to each other. In hindsight, as we come to, I know why they did that, but they did. And bear in mind, my phone has been going constantly and I've ignored it. And I'm sitting on the bench and it goes again. It wasn't a withheld number. It was just a number I didn't recognise.
Yeah.
And I don't know why. I do not know why, but I answered this one. And it wasn't the police. It wasn't a family member. It was a very junior member of my staff who had never spoken to me before. Hence, the number wasn't even in my phone.
Yeah.
And said, Adam, I don't know why, but you know, I've got some idea of what's going on. And I just wanted to see how you are. Now, I didn't say I'm sitting on a bench about to jump off a cliff, but I did say, you know, life is tough right now. And then this young lady said, she goes, Adam, everything is going to be fine. I said, oh, okay. Why is that? She said, I've seen you with Ellie. I've seen you with your daughter. And you're an amazing dad. And you're going to get her back because you can't fight fate. And now I have the words can't fight fate tattooed on my arm. Because she said that at that point. And literally, at the point that she said that, my name got shouted out. Literally, Adam. And because I'm kind of in a semi-delirious state, I literally looked up. I thought it was the big man upstairs. I had no idea who was shouting. And then literally from behind me, 3 Devon and Cornwall police appeared. And they sat with me on the bench. They didn't put me to the floor. They didn't put me in cuffs. They didn't speak to me as if, oh, here we go, here's another one. They spoke to me like a human being. They were fabulous. And they stayed with me for a long time. They talked to me. They listened to me. They cried with me. And then one of them, and these words will live with me forever, said, Adam, if you now want to go and jump, I'm not going to stop you. And I did smile. He made me smile. And I said, I'm sure you're not supposed to say that. He goes, no, I'm not going to stop you. He goes, but I do want to say one thing to you. You're doing it because you don't believe you're ever going to see Ellie again. And I said, yeah, that's exactly what I'm doing. And he said, do it and you're definitely never going to see it again. And it was just like the light bulb moment. And I said, but listen, I've got nothing left. I'm finished. I'm done. He goes, no, we're going to get through this. I said, no, you're not listening to me. I've got nothing left. He said, no, we are going to get through this. And I realized then that some guy who never met me before in his life, who's probably had a whole series of incidents with people going through mental health crisis on a daily basis. The reason that people were staring is because I was sitting in what turned out to be a well-renowned spot. I didn't know that at the time.
Yeah.
And yet he treated me like he genuinely cared. And it was his words and what he did and how he said it. And he said, we're going to get through this together. That basically became 6 years later, the whole basis of taking off the mask. Now you can see how it's all interlinked. People who don't know you genuinely caring about you. And from there, I came home. I got the fight. He gave me some strength. I built myself back up. I got my daughter back. I'd never say I won my daughter back because a child is not a game. There's no victor. There's no victor. But the right thing prevailed. I was reunited with my daughter. She's now a teenager and doesn't talk to me again. But that's that's just the norm. But ultimately, that was the life-changing experience. And that was it. And it was then with my blog when I wrote that story. And I guess, reading it's quite a good story. It is, and it's got one that builds up quite nicely.
Yeah.
It creates tears, okay? And tears bring in audiences. I know that. And unfortunately, the majority of people in that state don't get that.
Yeah.
But what I was very keen to do is suicide only comes into the public consciousness when somebody famous dies. 6,500 men in this country are taking their own lives each year.
Yeah.
How many of them are famous? And there's the point. And I wasn't famous. So, and that was it. It was about, this is going on everywhere. This is going on in your street. And the successful Ofsted winning senior leader of a successful school who seems to have enough money and a nice car and go on plenty of holidays means nothing. Nothing whatsoever. And it could be any of us at any time.
It really can. And obviously your reason is probably quite a common one. But I think it's important to say that it can be for any reason. I think one of the things that I've learned doing this is the outcome is based on your personal ability to cope with whatever it might be. And just because it's taken someone the far extreme to get there, and someone who may have done the most minor thing to the majority of people, it doesn't matter.
Absolutely.
I think it's really important that how you get there is irrelevant, but it is very common, and there's a reason why people do get there. Honestly, thanks so much for sharing that in that detail. It's lovely. I didn't want to interrupt at all because it was well put together. I did a podcast with a guy called Connor, who is still fighting to see his child at the moment. And he talks about role models and networks around him that have been there and done that. And that's what's helped him through it, because it's a very slow process. And
absolutely. And, the most common people that appear in my taking off the mask inbox or come onto the group are men fighting for their children, and I'm extremely passionate about it. I've sat on a few working parties. At the end of the day, it's very easy to, and people do, and I was one of those. Women are to blame for all of this. Absolutely not. Mothers wouldn't be able to do that if the judicial system was fair.
Yeah.
And there was the problem, the family law system. It's nothing to do with blaming the other person. It's absolutely down to the family law system. If the family law system was as it was, I would have instantly had access to my daughter. That's how it should be. That's how it happens in many other countries in the world. We just have this very slow, slightly broken family law system. I've been working on that for years. There have been some changes. There needs to be far more. But we are slowly but surely getting there. Listen, we talked earlier, didn't we, about stereotypes and the male and female stereotype. our family law system is based on that stereotype, that a child is better with their mum. The mum is the person who looks after the child. Actually, no, what about professional women who want to work, etc., etc.? That, when this law was made, that didn't exist. So we need to change with the times, and the law needs to change with the times, you know. So, you know, it's too easy to blame where the blame shouldn't be put, and the blame categorically lies with the archaic family law system that we have.
Yeah, it's that was sort of his response to it was, it's just a slow system, and as soon as he got his head around that, it made life a lot easier for him. And he just, and I actually ironically did some work with a charity many years ago that works on both sides of this, like separation support, and it's like looking at not using your lawyer as a sounding board, because they're expensive people to cry at, and it was like going to them with facts and figures and then walking away.
You're absolutely right. But at the end of the day, slowly Catchy Monkey made my solicitor about 16 grand.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? He's delighted.
I'm sure he's got a nice car and a nice house too.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. You know, it works in their favour. If it was rapid and we just needed to go into the magistrate's court, fill in a form, and it was done, they'd take nothing from it, would they?
No, exactly. So yeah, it's there's a lot of things to take from that, and I think it was a really thank you for sharing that. It's really important that you feel comfortable doing that now as well, because it's obviously helping other people, which is great to see. So let's move on to what's now and what's next. So obviously you had some success with taking off the mask, and you thought, you know what, I fancy these 80-hour work weeks again.
Yeah, exactly. Well, it's interesting. One thing I vowed to do was to never do those hours again. But ultimately, I'm also a person who finds it very difficult to say no. And actually, you know, I walked away from education, but I didn't want to. It was my passion. It still is my passion. Working with the most vulnerable young people is my absolute passion. And once my story came out, the idea of a ex-head teacher who tried to kill himself makes headlines. It shouldn't, but it does. And it got in the local newspapers, and it got on the radio, and people wanted to talk to me. I'm not a go at you, Lewis. I'm delighted to, but they wanted to hear this story. But the problem was, it was all about head teacher tries to kill himself. It was not about what it should be about, which is the mental health crisis that we're going through. And so I've always been very good. So I've written my own articles to follow these up, to say, actually, it's not about my story. If you want to use my story as a catalyst to something else, then fine. But just don't use my story in isolation because you think it's a good story.
Yeah.
That achieves nothing. And I did that, and I went away on holiday. And while I was away on holiday, I got an email from a local deputy head teacher. I will name him because he's so influential in what happened next. It was Garrett Murray, who at the time was the deputy head teacher of St John Fisher Catholic College in Newcastle-under-Lyme in Staffordshire. He is now the head teacher, incidentally. But at the time he was the deputy. And he read my story, and he saw, hang on, this is education, mental health. We're going through an absolute crisis in education. Can this guy help? And I'd never thought about it, never considered it. But he said, listen, if you get a chance, when you get back off holiday, can we have a chat? And we did. And having that conversation with somebody in a senior leadership role in the school, and me saying my bits and him saying his back, I suddenly realised the guilt I felt from walking away. I don't have to. I can still give back. I knew I couldn't leave the school anymore. It would break me. But I can still give back. And so he asked me to go into his school to support him and his staff initially, to find out what the state of play was. And he came up with a wonderful quote. He goes, and this was so true for senior leaders and in business and education. He goes, I think I look after my staff's mental health quite good. He didn't say I do. He said, I think I do. I want you to find out if that's true. But actually, it was the end of his sentence. He said, but I'm not sure who's there to look after me. And that is enormous with school leaders. I was the same.
Yeah.
I carried as much as I could the trauma and concerns and worries of my staff, but I got nowhere to put it. Nowhere to put it at all. So the bag got heavier and heavier and heavier. And so kind of what happened from this very small thing from that one meeting with that head teacher, I came up with the idea of actually, well, I wonder if other schools would like that. And I created Parks Education, and it is about, but it's Parks Education taking off the mask. The two are inextricably interlinked.
Yeah.
It is about mental health and education, my two passions, and trying to support mental health. The crisis in education, as you well know, the number of teachers, 1/3 of teachers all leave within the first 5 years. Absence due to mental health in education is enormous. People go around saying, I can't understand it. They get 13 weeks holiday a year. Listen, if you think they get 13 weeks holiday a year, you've not spent much time with teachers. It's like, if a teacher can grab 1 week's holiday a year, I'm amazed most of the time, but that's what they hear all the time. And I guess they just don't feel particularly valued. And that can be in the workplace and outside in society. So I sort of started to go into schools, speak to staff, support staff, but on seminars, sessions, training, talking, one-to-ones. I would do absolutely anything I could to keep good teachers in the profession. That was my bottom line. I didn't want people to leave the profession. There were too many brilliant teachers leaving the profession. And then, of course, once I was in there, they looked at what I'd actually done and then said, well, can you work with the kids as well? So I went from working with the staff to working with the kids. And it kind of, everything just kind of snowballed from there. So like taking off the mask, I didn't go with any great business plan. I want to do this, 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 and this. I love things to just happen. And everything that I now do in schools, and that ranges from one-to-one work with staff, one-to-one work with kids, group working with kids, still teaching kids, group working with staff, doing training programs, working with governors. I do everything that I did as a head teacher once again. But it's so different when you're doing it from the outside looking in. But my one thing to all the schools and to all the head teachers that speak to me is you've got to be prepared for warts and all. If you want me to come in and just do a rubber stamp that you can say to Ofsted that you support your staff's mental health and you don't, you're not going to get that from me.
Yeah.
There are people out there, there are people who will tick a box for hire. That's not a problem, but I can't do it. And I have turned down work when I've known that that's what people have wanted me for. If you've been to where I've been to, you won't do that. And so that's what I do. So, I'm working in schools 3 full days a week at this moment in time, which I was never going to do. I always said I'd only just do one. And then just to decide that I was not doing enough, I decided to enter into local politics. And I'm now a town and district councillor as well. But again, as with everything that I do, standing completely on a mandate of wellbeing, mental health and education. So those are my passions. That's what I do when I stand up in the chamber. It is everything to do with wellbeing, everything to do with mental health, or everything to do with education. I'm not in it for the politics. I don't play politics. Any aspect of society where I think I can make a change, if there is a space, I will jump into it. So I've jumped into it in the charity sector. I've jumped into it in the consultancy and education sector. I've jumped into it now in the politics centre. It's not about Adam Parks. It's about there is a space that I may be able to make some change. And that's what it is. And if there's another space, I've no doubt, Lewis, I'll try and jump into it.
Amazing. So what do you think is affecting kids the most these days? What do you think is causing the crisis?
Yeah, and this is one that you'll hear because, there are many people out there, certainly with regard to young people, that have become a little bit what I call mental health deaf. Yeah. And what I mean by that is they hear it so often that they don't believe it exists, or they think that it is just used as an excuse.
Yes.
Now, there are a number of reasons for that, and some of them I will kind of criticise. Excuse me, I'm just moving my camera there a second. I will call some of this sort of X, Y, and Z X, Y, and Z list celebrities who have categorically tried to use it when their career has been down the pan.
Yeah.
That doesn't help the situation. That in any shape or form. There is also social media,
Yeah.
and that has been massive. And if you want to talk about what is the biggest thing that is having an impact on young people's mental health, there is no doubt whatsoever that it's social media. And I don't just mean the social media and the messages that they send to each other and the pressures that are put on each other by social media and by so-called influencers. I'm talking about the fact that because they're on social media, they're not going out, they're not breathing the fresh air, they're not going out on the bikes and doing ramps or going out on the skateboards and falling over and getting covered in mud and dirt and such like that you would say generations of children have always done before.
Yeah.
Childhood is a completely different experience. And that is enormous. And the influence that that is having and the amount of work that I do with young people, because of when you break it down, social media influences is enormous. But also, you can't escape it. I know we're sick of talking about it, but if you say that COVID isn't relevant, that's just lies.
Yeah.
COVID is massive. And the main problem I see with COVID is not even so much the 2 years out of school, although that is massive, and for some kids, it was huge.
Yeah.
It's the years that they missed in those schools, and if there were transition years, it was absolutely enormous. But the problem, actually, for me, the biggest issue now is that government, and I'm not blaming government, I'm not being political here, but the view was once we were all back and we were all allowed to mix again and back in schools and like it is now and everything back to inverted commas normal, everybody will be fine. No, that's not going to happen. This is a generational experience.
Yeah.
The impact of COVID will impact on people quite literally almost for the rest of their lives. And I'll explain why. If you were 8 years old when COVID hit, or 6 years old when COVID hit, a quarter of your life was lost.
Yeah.
A
Crazy.
quarter. For me, that would be 16, 17 years. If something had affected my life for 17 years, how could I say that that would not affect me for the rest of my life? Of course it would. So actually, the fact that it was 2 years is an absolute irrelevance to young people. It's the percentage of the life that was affected. And that was enormous. And that's why this impact is going to be forever. So the government idea of COVID recovery schemes and supporting schools financially for a couple of years post-COVID is absolutely pointless. They hadn't done the maths. They hadn't worked it out because it was all being done by scientists and doctors, medical doctors. You should have got the psychologists, the psychiatrists, the counsellors, the teachers, the parents. All those people should have been involved in that decision making. And that's my issue with politics in general and why I've jumped into it. Because you need to be speaking to the people that have been there. I mean, how simple could you be? If you want to talk education, speak to people that are experts in education. If you want to speak psychology and mental health, speak to people that are experts in mental health. These decisions should not be made by politicians who the only thing that they have to make the decision by is an abacus and how many pounds, shillings and pence that they've got.
Yeah, it's an interesting thought process on it. I think for me, the weaponization of mental health is a big thing. So like using words like trauma and gaslighting and saying that
Yes,
this is a big thing. I mean, it's a big thing in adults, let alone children. I mean,
absolutely. And I'm sitting in one-to-ones, and I've had one-to-ones with young people from age 5 to 18 who are when they're still in education. And I have had terms depression, anxiety, gaslighting, narcissist given to me by primary age children.
Crazy. That I don't think I knew a word over 6 letters when I was in primary.
No, and I didn't want to either. I didn't want to know it. There's the point. And this is the influence of social media, because it is there. Because there are influencers who are 12, 13, 14, who are openly talking about depression, anxiety, and mental health.
Yeah.
And there's the point. You know, and this is mental health deafness. This is exactly the point. And so, are we convincing some children that they're struggling with their mental health? Oh, yes, we are.
Yeah.
Yes, we are. And I will regularly to say to some person that, no, being sad is not a mental health problem. It's completely normal. Having low mood is completely normal. There's a far cry from that and depression.
Yeah.
And if I described what my depression looked like, you would see how different it was. Depression is not getting out of bed for a week and not eating for 17 days, not sleeping for a fortnight, lying in your own filth. That is depression. Low mood is very, very different.
Yeah, it literally is. If you're not having ebbs and flows in life, what is life anyway? But yeah, depression is horrendous, and
Yes,
true anxiety is horrendous. And
absolutely,
like,
absolutely.
I've had anxiety attacks in the Liverpool station, and I just wanted to. I had to get off the platform. I had to
Yes,
go and stand outside in a corner, in next
yes,
to two walls. The fear of people seeing me. I just wanted the world
exactly,
to engulf me. Not,
exactly.
oh, I'm a little bit nervous. I must be anxious.
Yeah. Oh, and it does happen. You know, there are young people where the teacher will ask them a question and they say, I've had a panic attack, and go running out and then come running to me and say, I'm having a panic attack. And, you know, can we rest assured, look, this man says, no, you're not having a panic attack. You're not having an anxiety attack.
Yeah,
Who's told you that that's what it is? And you're right. There are adults in positions of trust that are using that terminology, and they need to stop.
yeah. Well, that's going to be my question now, I guess. What needs to change? What needs to change in this space?
Listen, the key thing for me with this is the word health after mental. And we seem to have got it, and then until we put mental health in the same space as mental health in the same space as physical health, we're going to have this problem. Because we don't have that problem when we talk about heart health or cancer health or a broken leg. But when it comes to mental health, we've not quite got it. We've not put it into the same space. So actually, if we try and do stuff around this, that's just woolly. We actually need to get back to core. And the thing for me is to actually get the whole idea that it's about health and incorporating mental health and having feelings about mental health and talking about mental health just like we would any other health. And we don't go around talking about cancer all day or heart trauma all day or our ingrowing toenails all day. But for some reason at this moment in time, mental health is what everybody's talking about all the time. And actually, we need to pull it down. It needs to fall into that space of health.
Yeah.
And I think when we get there, that's when we'll be in a better place. And I think generationally, there is an opportunity to get there.
Yeah.
There is. Because I know that the young people can be slightly exaggerative about it, but actually, when haven't young people exaggerated about things since time immemorial? That's what they do. But on the positive side, they are far more aware of it, understanding of it, and accepting of it.
Yes.
So maybe they exaggerate about it a little bit right now, but ultimately that is going to change, and they are going to be a generation for which mental health is the norm,
Yes.
and it is part of health. So actually, whilst we're going through a bit of a negative with that kind of group at this moment in time, I think ultimately it will lead to the positive. My mum's 87 years old. You know, she still will say things like, "It didn't happen in my day." I think that's always wonderful. Men didn't have mental health problems in my day. Yes, they did, Mum. They used to just go to the pub and drink all day.
Yeah.
And then maybe go home and then maybe beat up their wives and partners, but nothing was said about it. That's the difference. It's not a new thing. It has always been there. So two of my great uncles committed suicide. Sorry, completed suicide. Should never say committed. Completed suicide. after the First World War. This is not a new thing. Two brothers. It's not a new thing. It's just that it was always brushed under the carpet and never spoken about. That was the stigma. But because of that, there are generations of people who think that it's just a new thing. Never happened in my day. Of course it did.
Yeah, we're just talking about it more. The
Exactly.
bringing mental health into health is an interesting angle to it. Speaking to a couple of people this week, done a couple of podcasts, and one of them is talking about sort of almost dropping the health and saying sort of like mental fitness and like looking at that sort
Yes,
of thing.
I absolutely agree. Because actually, and I think that raises a good point. It isn't just, you can't just put mental health in a box. You can't just put cancer in a box.
Yeah.
You can't just put heart disease in a box. You know, cancer comes in many different forms, and some are very fatal, some are not, some are easy curable, some aren't. You know, like any other health. So actually, I think there are things to do with. I have no problem with a diagnosed mental illness, using an old-fashioned term, coming under the term health. That's fine. You know, because there are mental illnesses that are incurable.
Yeah.
You know, you know, if you're suffering bipolar, schizophrenia, whatever it may be, you can live a perfectly normal life. I have friends, obviously, because of what I do now, I have friends that fall into all these groupings who are absolutely normal. They have not got two heads or anything like that, and they're not scary to be around.
Yeah.
Because, like with any other health thing, it is just controlled with medication, just like anything else. I have my heart rate is too quick. I take a tablet every day for it. There you go. That's just what we do. But then there are mental experiences that I would then fall under that mental fitness. You know, you can have a temporary slip in your mental fitness.
Yeah.
You know, and I don't think we need to call that mental health, like you say, because you know what? We're going to do it, we're going to sort it, and we're going to put you right. Whereas we're not going to cure somebody with paranoid schizophrenia.
No, there is those extremes, right? And I think use your government example. Like, let's look at some of where they're balancing pounds, pence, and shillings, as you said.
Yeah.
When it comes to cancer and lung cancer, there's obviously now campaigns against smoking and not to smoke and not to take it up,
Absolutely.
and those sort of things. You're saying there's this generational change. I imagine it won't be long until we have campaigns around mindfulness and having conversations so that you don't spiral into these things long term and sort of potentially go into that side of things. Because
sorry, go on.
No, I was just going to say, because with this current weaponization of those terms, it's obviously naturally going to put a strain on the people that need it, the bipolars, the schizophrenics, the people that are actually in severe depression, and that's taking resources away from people that need it.
And you're absolutely right. And actually, to put that into some perspective, we're very aware that the CAM system at the moment, we hear about it being broken, and it is broken, and I get very frustrated about it. But actually, this sounds awful, but I've got to say we are partially to blame for that, and by that I mean society, because there are many, many people out there who are desperate to get a diagnosis. And that sounds like an awful thing to admit, but there are. You know, I come across it on a regular basis.
Yeah.
The young people and their parents who are desperate for a diagnosis, when actually there is no diagnosis needed. But actually, all these referrals are going in, and the waiting lists are longer than they've ever been, because the referrals are more than they have ever been. Yeah. Don't get me wrong. CAMS needs a complete overhaul. I am not defending them in that sense. But ultimately, we aren't helping the situation. But within those referrals, Lewis, are paranoid schizophrenics, bipolars, who really need to be seen, and they're not. And there's the problem. I think with regard to are we going to see mindfulness, etc. campaigns, I think we already are to some extent. The problem is, and this probably relates to what we just said, they're targeting that younger age group with them. I'm seeing them on social media and places like that. We need to get them on terrestrial television and terrestrial radio and things like that. and not just target the younger generation. But I am seeing it. The problem is you're putting it on social media, you're watching it on social media, and then you're watching an influencer who's 14 years old and openly talking about her self-harm. Then, that there's the problem, and I don't see how we can kind of balance that.
Yeah, it's probably going to be a part two, most definitely, a more in-depth conversation just on those parts alone. Adam, I really want to thank you for your time today. It's been an absolute pleasure talking to you and hearing your story and hearing what you're doing now. But I would love to leave the final thoughts with you and let you sort of sum up. And if you want people to find you or find something that you're doing, then please summarize that in the last little bit as well.
Yeah, no, thank you, Lewis. It's been wonderful. I will try and get my message across in any way that I can. Anybody can contact me at any time. They're not going to get sent an invoice or a bill. If you on Facebook, it's the Taking Off the Mask Community is the group. If you want to have take a look at the group, but you can also get hold of me through the takingoffthemask.org website, and parkseducation.com. All my emails and contact details are there. I will always endeavour to get back to you. What I will say, and my passing comment and my final comment would be the same comment that I would, I'm sure many people have given, and I'll make this specifically for your main audience, which is men. You'll have heard it many times before, and people will say things to you like, "You're not alone. We've all been there. I understand. I get it. I know that means nothing to you. I know that means nothing to you because it meant absolutely nothing to me. But you know what? You've never met me. You've no idea who I am. You can drop me a text message. You can send me an email, and let's have a chat. Not from a psychological point of view, not even from a mental health point of view. Let's have a chat and let's see if you are right and whether or not we can change your mind."
Amazing. Thank you so much, Adam.